Hey guys, welcome back to Yaya's Reading Nook. My name is Stephanie. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back. Sorry, already. As you can tell, it's a no work day, no makeup. There are days when I don't wear it to work anyway because I work in the back, so I don't care. So today I am coming to you with the 4 books that I read in January, and one I actually listened to all the way, so I don't have it to show. And yeah, I tried to figure out how to put it up on the screen, and I'm still working on it. Let's just say that. But the other 3, 2 of them I did read all the way through, and then one I listened to mostly, and then of course the library where I get my Libby app from only gives you 7 days, so it went away. So I just finished reading it. It was no big deal. So the first one I'll go ahead and talk about. I do not have a cover or anything. Maybe when I go shopping at the end of the month, I'm going to try to look for that series or part of that series, and I'll have the cover then. Maybe. I don't know. But the first one was called Hooked on Murder by Betty Heckman. It is a cozy mystery series called the Crochet Mystery Series. And this is book 1. It took place with a woman named Molly Pink, and her husband had been dead for a couple years. So now she has the quintessential boyfriend, who's the cop. But this one's a little different. She's a little bit older, and she has 2 grown sons. One of them kind of went into the same business her husband was in, which they live in Tarzana, like around the LA area, and he was like kind of like a talent agent. And so that older son went into that. The younger one is a musician. They're both in their probably mid-20s, I guess. I don't know. She's close to 50. And her boyfriend has a son. So grown kids don't like mom dating. Young kids not too cool about dad dating, but, you know, mom and dad are older. They can do what they want to do. Anyway, so Molly goes one day to her deceased husband's former partner's house to take some crochet hooks to her. Now, Ellen is a member of the Tarzana Hookers, which is a group of women that meets in Molly's in the bookstore Molly works at to do crochet projects for like auctions and raffles and charity events. So they have been making a blanket out of granny squares. And if you don't know what a granny square is, it's just like this little thing that goes around and round and round, and you get to a certain size and that's where you stop. And so she has taken a bunch of hooks to Ellen, and when she walks in, she finds Ellen dead on the floor. Because isn't that always the way these work out? Now she's like, oh my gosh. And of course the police come in and find her standing over Ellen with these crochet hooks in her hand. And she's like, I didn't do it. I came here to bring her these hooks, and I don't know what happened. So one of the policemen or detectives, her name is Heather, and she has the hots for Molly's boyfriend, and Molly knows it. So Detective Heather is on the case, and Detective Heather is going to try to prove Molly did it, and Molly's out to prove she didn't do it. Well, she goes back to the bookstore where the Tarzana Hookers are, and there is one lady, Adele, who thinks that now that Ellen's dead, she should be the leader of this group. But there's also a lady named Sisu who thinks that Ellen's dead, so she should be the leader of the group. So you got these 2 women who've probably been crocheting their whole life doing this with each other. And Molly's like, whoa, I want to join you guys and help. And they look at her and they say, do you know how to crochet? And she goes, well, no, can't be too hard. Don't ever say that to a crocheter, not even a knitter. I'm just saying. Ask me how I know. So they decide that Cece is going to teach Molly how to crochet. And they get a little other, and the cool thing about this though, the bookstore Molly works at also has the crochet yarn in it. Now, anyone that knows me knows that crafting and books, put them together, and I ain't gonna leave the store, y'all. Everything can be burning down around me. I'm not leaving the store. I'm gonna sit there and crochet. and listen to a book. So anyway, short story long, um, we have a second murder of a woman named Natalie who was trying to take over the business because she used to work there, or she worked there. So she's trying to take over Ellen's spot. And we come to find out Ellen's husband is sort of a cad, if you will. And he's got himself a girlfriend. And, I mean, like right after Ellen's dead, they find out about it. But we don't know who the girlfriend is. Well, Molly thinks the girlfriend did it. At first she thought someone else did it. But then they're like, no, she couldn't have done it. She dead. But the girl that killed herself, that supposedly jumped out of I think it's like a 4-story window, had written a suicide note right after she ordered a pizza. So, you know, what are you going to do but convince the cop that thinks you probably did that too, that you didn't do it? So in the end, typical cozy mystery, killer is found by Molly, by accident I might say. She and the boyfriend are good to go again. The Tarzana hookers are still hooking, and we're on to book 2. It's your typical cozy mystery. I really enjoyed it though, so I think I'm going to try to find those when I go to McKay's on my birthday to see if I can kind of like start building that library, because I would like to read the whole series. But I am going to keep listening to them because I have other books that I would like to read too. So I think I gave that one like a 3.75 star. The next book I read, I kind of listened to it for most of it. And then Libby said, we want our book back. And I said, okay, fine, take it. And it is Too Old for This by Samantha Downing. Now, I love this little lady, Lottie. She's my spirit grandma. Lottie is in her late 70s, I would say, mid to late 70s. 40 years ago, Lottie was accused of being a murderer of not 1, not 2, but 3 people. And she got herself out of it. They could never prove she had done it. But the police officer that was investigating her knew she did it. He just could not figure it out. So Molly sued the city they were living in. They paid her a bunch of money. She got out of Dodge with her son Peter. And fast forward 30 years later, she is retired from bank life, and she is retired from serial killer life. Until a girl named Plum shows up on 70-something-year-old Molly's door and says, I'm a journalist and I do docuseries, and I would like to do one on you because I've heard about your case and I want to prove you didn't do it. And Molly's like, I don't want to talk about it. She goes, but let me show you what I've done. And Molly's like, are you the same chick that's been calling? She goes, yes, I just thought I'd drop in. Although I came from several states away, but that's okay. So Molly says, Molly, I'm still back in the last one. Lottie says, okay, fine, come in. Would you like some tea, dear? And so the girl sits down and Lottie starts making her some tea. And the girl's got her laptop open and she's talking. And all of a sudden, thwack, right on the back of her head. Cold cocks her back of the head, breaks the skull. Blood starts coming out. She ain't going nowhere. Especially not back home to make a documentary. So now Lottie's got a conundrum going on. She's 70-something years old. She's not as strong as she used to be. She's got the hip problems. She might be a little stooped, but she's got to take care of this body so she can keep her reputation of being one who is accused but never convicted. Not even tried, not even arrested. So she's very thoughtful in what she does. She grabs a plastic bag, probably like a Walmart bag, puts it around the girl's head, tapes it up so the blood won't get all over the place. She goes out to her little shed, gets her wheelbarrow, takes it inside, throws the girl inside, takes it to her freezer, which happens to be on and empty. So she throws her in there, goes back in, wipes up the blood, and then goes, what am I going to do? What do I need to do? Need to get rid of the body, need to get rid of the evidence, need to get rid of the phone, need to get rid of the car. She's done this before, y'all. She knows what she's doing. Or has she? And does she? So Plum's gone missing. And Plum's boyfriend shows up. And she's like, well, honey, she said she was going out of town after she did this. Maybe she just caught a flight and went somewhere. So he leaves. Well, then people start coming around and, looking for Plum. Plum's mother, who's never been around a whole lot, comes looking for Plum. And she's like, well, she had this black eye and she had this bruise and this burn. And she told me her boyfriend did it. And the mom's like, no, she didn't. No, she didn't. You're lying. But she goes home anyway. Well, Molly's already taking care of the Plum problem. Molly's got 2 more problems. Actually, 3. There's a cop that shows up on her doorstep. There's Plum's boyfriend. And there's Plum's mama. Oh, and 4. Grown son who's divorced is marrying his girlfriend who's half his age and pregnant. And he wants to do it where Molly lives. So this just goes on a hijinks thing of people coming into Molly's life, Molly having to take care of the problem. And I think in this one, Plum, 2, I think there's like 4 or 5 people that go missing. Now what she does with Plum is she cuts her up with her little electric hacksaw, gets the butch paper, wraps her up in the butch paper, parts up in the butch paper, writes on it chicken legs or lamb chops or whatever, hot-head cheese. And then she throws her in the fire, hoping that she's far enough distance away that nobody's going to smell the stinky, weird burn. So I really like this, and the very last sentence was the best thing ever. And I know it's not going to be a continuation, because how can you continue a nearly 80-year-old serial killer? But I gave this one a 5. If you haven't read it, it's just, and you're at the age where you have grandchildren, or you're retired and you just don't want to be bothered with your former life, yeah, that's for you. She also wrote one called My Lovely Wife, which I really thought I need to read. It's been sitting on my shelf saying read me for a while. Anyway, that was a 5-star. My next one I read was The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Allie Carter. And Allie wrote 2 of my favorite books from last year, The Blonde Identity and The Blonde That Came in from the Cold. And this is about Ethan and Maddie, or Maggie. Totally forgot now. Anyway, meet Maggie. Maggie Chase and Ethan Wyatt. And they are both writers. They do mystery writers. And Ethan has beaten Molly out for a job for being a writer that this publishing company is going to take instead of her. And so their editor calls them in one day and says, I have something for you to do over Christmas. And what is it? Get on a plane and go to England and meet a lady named Eleanor Ashby. Now, Eleanor is today's version, the modern version of Agatha Christie. She's called the Duchess of Death for one reason and one reason only, and that's because she writes excellent murder mysteries. Maggie has read every one of her books, knows them inside and out, and knows that Eleanor basically uses poison the same way Agatha Christie would do in times. Agatha Christie actually worked at an apothecary and learned all about poisons. So that's how she was able to use them in her book so well. Supposedly Eleanor has very good luck with poisonous plants too. And once they get there, they find out why. They get there and they're met by Eleanor and Eleanor's family and a doctor and a caretaker and a lawyer And they're like, oh, what is this? What are we doing here? And Eleanor goes, well, it's Christmas. Well, Maggie still thinks they're her and Ethan are in a challenge to see who Eleanor will pick to write her books because she's retiring. Maggie's going to win because Ethan beat her out the last time. Maggie doesn't like Ethan. Ethan doesn't really understand why Maggie doesn't like Ethan. So anyway, it goes on a long mystery. Eleanor ends up disappearing on the second day there. And nobody's really too worried about it because Eleanor lives in a big rambling house. Maybe she went some one of the other rooms and fell asleep and just taking a long nap. Maggie and Ethan don't believe it. So they go looking for her. They get shot at. And then that's when people kind of start taking it seriously. So everyone's like, oh my God, she's gone. And the niece and nephew or whoever they are like, oh my gosh, what if she's out in the snow and she's cold? And Ethan and Maggie are like, oh my gosh, why don't you people start looking for her? And they do. And they find down in the basement a really big basement that goes under the ground. And they go up through this door, and what do they find but the outhouse? What's in the outhouse? Poisonous plants. Well, maybe we should leave. So in the end, Eleanor is not proven dead. Nobody's taken to jail for it. But Maggie and Ethan kind of become friends, and a little bit more probably, because it shows several months later, and they're in Italy still looking for Eleanor. I gave it, I want to say like a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I really like Ally Carter's writing. It's simple enough to where you're not like, ugh, because she has been, or if she probably still is, a YA writer. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say The Blonde Identity was her first foray into adult writing. And so you see the transition a little bit when you read those books, but they're very simple, straight to the point type books. We're not going here, there, and everywhere to find out what's going on. I mean, they do go on these little rambling things, but it's what it is. My last book, the last book I read was for my Parnassus Book Club in Nashville, and it was Peggy by Rebecca Godfrey and Leslie Jameson, and it was about Peggy Guggenheim. And I've never heard of Peggy Guggenheim. I've heard of the Guggenheim Museum. I think it's in New York. Yeah, I don't think it's in D.C. I would have found it by now because my oldest and his wife live there. And when I go there like every 18 months to 24 months, I go to at least 3 or 4 museums. Anyway, this is about Peggy Guggenheim, and her father and mother split when she was about 10 or 12 years old. She had an older sister, Benita, and they were really, really close. And then the younger sister, Hazel, was quite a bit younger than them. So it was like 2 sisters and then an only child. And Peggy's dad, her mom was not very nice to her at times. She'd tell her she wasn't pretty enough. This was too ugly. This was too fat. But her dad always told her she was pretty. And she was the favorite. Well, Mom and Dad split up. Dad gets himself a hot young thing. And they don't know that until he's driving back, or he's coming back from England on the rich people ship, aka the Titanic, and it goes down and he drowns. So Peggy and her sisters and her mom are left with basically no money because Dad pretty much wasted the money. And her 2 uncles, I can't remember what I'm saying, but one of them is Simon. They're taking over the trust funds. Well, when Peggy turns of age, she grabs most of hers and she heads off to Paris, where this book takes place mostly in Paris, around Paris, France, I think a little bit in Italy. And while she's there, she meets a man named Lawrence Vale, and he's a writer. And this is during the time where they had the salons where the writers and the poets would come in and the artists would come in, but it was mostly men. And Peggy wanted to get into that lifestyle. She wanted to get into the scene of things. So she hooks up with Lawrence. And what do you know? Peggy starts paying for everything. Lawrence is very volatile. I mean, he would slap her, punch her, kick her. Like, he took, I think, some jam or something and smashed it in her head one time. He threw her out in front of a car. Just for saying she didn't want to walk in the rain to somebody's house she didn't want to go to. So he was very mean. But they were married 17 years and had 2 kids. They had a son and a daughter. And when they split up, the son went to live with the dad, and the daughter went to live with Peggy. Well, then Peggy meets another man who's an artist, and she marries him, and I can't remember what his name is. I don't think it says on here. Anyway, he was almost as bad. So she wasn't with him for very long, maybe about 5 years, and I think he died or something. Then she's like, I'm going to live the free spirit. My daughter goes to visit her dad a lot. Right now, she's in Switzerland, or she's in the Mediterranean, or she's over in the States. So Peggy meets this young man through James Joyce, and the man's name is Sam Beckett. Now, Sam Beckett wants to be a writer or an artist, and Peggy hooks up with him. Now, Peggy could be his mama, but that's okay. We're in France. One in France. And she, surprisingly, is paying for everything. Well, about this time, she decides she wants to do a museum in Paris, and she wants her money. And well, she wanted, I think, to originally take it to New York, but her uncle said, we're not doing that kind of stuff. We're doing the masters. We don't have this stuff where people just throw paint on a canvas as they're smoking a cigarette and dropping stuff on it and calling it art, aka Jackson Pollock. He used to paint, because I was an art history minor. He would put the canvas on the floor. He might have change or chewed up gum or something in his pocket. He would be smoking a cigarette. Whatever fell on the painting stayed on the painting. Well, you got the others like Gali and Picasso, who were painting some weird stuff. No, they're not putting that in that Guggenheim Museum. That's an art museum. You do somewhere else, girlfriend. So she decides to open up her own Guggenheim Museum. Now, I gave this a 3.5 star because the story, when we were talking about it, or I don't really ever talk about it, but when they were talking about it at book club, and I went back and thought about it, my hand's shaking for some reason, and I went back and thought about it, it was true. The book was choppy. It would be like, okay, Peggy's doing this. Whoops, this next page, Peggy's doing something else. Whoops, somebody's doing this. So it wasn't ever a completely smooth story, which is what I like in my nonfiction. And then all the different guys, and she meets the lady that helps her get away from her first husband and kind of introduces her to life in Italy, because she's dumb enough to buy this guy a house on a hill in Italy so he can climb rocks and sit on the beach and ponder his book that I don't think he ever wrote. But also, Leslie Jamison showed up to finish the last third of this book because Rebecca Godfrey passed away before she could finish it, and she had been working on it for 10 years. Okay, if I can't figure it out after a few years, either I'm too dumb to write the book or it's not worth writing. We don't ever really see a whole lot about Peggy and what she did and how she did it and how she set up her museum, how she got the funding. Well, she got the funding from her own money, but how she would like get other funding, how she would get people to come to the museum, her advertising ways, who she let show in her museum that may be a famous artist now. I do not believe her husband ever finished his book that he was writing. I do not think that Sam Beckett ever finished anything he started either, except using Woman and then moving on down the road. But it was a really interesting book because Peggy was supposed to find a nice man, get married, have children. And Peggy didn't do that. Peggy got married, but Peggy had Peggy got around, let's just say. And the really sad part in here was her sister Bettina had 5 or 6 miscarriages, and her husband was like, we're going to have a child no matter what. We're having a baby. And the doctors had told her husband she can't have any more. It's killing her. And of course, Peggy has been forced by her husband Lawrence, at the time she's still married, to go with him back to Italy when Bettina has another miscarriage and dies in the process. Well, Peggy blames herself because she thinks if she had been there with her sister would not have died. And her brother-in-law would have got to come to Jesus meeting. Now, her younger sister was almost as tragic. She had gotten married and had a couple of kids. And I think she was split up from her husband, and she was in this apartment. And I don't remember how many stories it was, but she was holding her children, and they fell out of her arms. Splat. Now some people said the kids just jumped over. The kids leaned over, she lost her grip, and they fell. Some people say that Hazel was in the process of getting a divorce and was really depressed and killed her kids. Nobody really knows. Hazel ended up in a sanatorium, like an asylum type thing, suffering from mental depression, probably a little bit of mental illness, probably some PSD from a wretched husband and basically a wretched life, because her mom didn't want her around. She sent her to boarding school when she was old enough to go, like she did Peggy and her sisters. So Mama was just there. I gave it a 3.5, basically only because of the writing was so choppy, kind of like this little review of this book was kind of choppy, and I'm just letting you know how it was. But yeah, if you want to read it and learn something about the Guggenheims, Peggy mostly, and what a wild woman she was, it's maybe one to pick up. If you don't mind the choppiness of it, it's one to pick up. If you want to hear about the way some of these people lived and think to yourself, why would you do that to yourself? Pick it up. If not, don't pick it up. Well, those are the 4 books that I read, listened to. Sorry I didn't have anything on the first one, but I went on Canva, was going to do something, and I couldn't get it done. And my son was trying to help me, and he got frustrated, and I said, forget it. So I decided to redo this one. Anyway, if you guys have read any of those books, let me know what you thought of them. If you've got any others by these authors to suggest for me, let me know that too. If you've hung around this long, thank you so much. Think about giving me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, think about subscribing. It's really fun on this end. I don't know about your end. I hope you guys have a really wonderful weekend. Things are melting here finally. Maybe the kids will go back to school. My grandson's been out. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. My grandson's been out for 2 weeks. Robert, if you are watching and you know who you are. My storage guy, Robert, he's over the storage units and stuff where I have a lot of my books. He called me one day at work and he's like, congratulations. I'm like, okay. He goes, no, you haven't missed a payment. You're great. You've hit 35 subscribers. Just want to call you and say congratulations. And I'm like, oh, okay. Cool. Didn't know it yet. So, if you have any questions for me, I'm still waiting for people to ask me questions. Maybe we should say when I get to 40 subscribers. I do ages right now. Anyway, if you stuck around this long, thank you so much for sticking around. Thumbs up, subscribe, bell, whatever. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.